Is it possible that what you don't know can actually kill you? And then, on a recent episode, we talked about if a deaf person died, would they leave behind a deaf ghost? Well, today we're going to take a different look at that phenomenon. What happens when a deaf person has a near-death experience? Today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. Hope you guys have some awesome plans for the weekend. I don't know what I'll be doing. Battlefield 6 and watching movies has pretty much been all of my weekends lately, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. Two things I really enjoy, but two other things I really enjoy. Two people who I enjoy the company of, not in any weird sort of way. Running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command, everyone get on your feet and give it up for Nick and Helena Bustin'. Woohoo, yeah, wee-ha! They're running on in. They got a little cartwheel routine, doing a little dance for all of us. Nick and Helena, I think is how you pronounce her name. Longtime supporters of the show, longtime members of the Fluffle. And recently, Nick posted his Spotify Wrapped, letting the world know how much he enjoys Dead Rabbit Radio. That is why they are going to be our captain or pilots this episode. You guys can't support the show financially through the merch store or the Patreon. I totally understand, I really do. Just do what Nick and Helena do. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. Okay, we got a lot of stuff to cover today. Oh, last reminder, Friday, January 30th is going to be our Dead Rabbit Radio movie night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We watch a bunch of short horror films. It's a lot of fun. That is for members of the Patreon. Either paid or free members can join. And if you're not a member of the Patreon, or if you can't make it at 7 p.m. on a Friday night, the very next day, January 31st, is our Dead Rabbit Radio movie morning. At 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be watching a bunch of short horror films. And that'll be open to everybody. So hopefully you guys can stop by for at least one of those. Hope to see you there. Okay, Nick and Helena. I don't know, man. It's 50-50 each time. Let's go ahead and get this ball rolling. I'm going to go ahead and toss you a steam shovel and a little conductor cap. Start shoveling coal into the carpenter caboose we're leaving behind Dead Rabbit Radio Command. Why don't you chug us all the way out to a sleepy suburban neighborhood. Chugga, 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 choo, choo. We pull into this sleepy suburban neighborhood, and I walk into one of the houses, and I go, yummy. And you're like, what? What is he looking at? I'm walking, you notice a quite plump dog. You're like, he's not going to eat that dog, is he? And then I don't eat the dog. I continue walking through the house, and I go, And you're like, what's he looking at? And you see that I'm looking at the fridge, and I open it up. I'm making that noise before I even open the fridge. Whatever is in here is going to be delicious. Open the fridge up, and I grab a big bottle of orange juice, and I go, watch this. Glug, 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 glug. I've been drinking a lot of orange juice lately. Probably an unhealthy amount, if I have to be honest, right? And not because I'm worried about the calories or the sugar content or anything like that. Obviously I count calories and stuff. The best thing in the world to drink. You know, you could have water. Nah, it's gross. Water's disgusting, but I'll drink some orange juice. Well, the other day, I was really thirsty. I've been getting super dehydrated lately. Because I think water's gross. I was like, I'd rather just sit here and shrivel up than drink that. I bought a jug of orange juice, and I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is pretty dope. Like, if I drank this whole jug, it's only 600 calories. It's like a half a gallon of orange juice. I was like, okay, yeah, because, I have a lot of calories to spare today. I haven't eaten a lot. I'm just going to drink this orange juice. I can drink the whole thing if I wanted to, I said to myself as I purchased it. And then I promptly went home and over the next 5 hours consumed an entire jug of orange juice. Now you go, Jason, that's not a big deal. And I didn't think so either. Thank you for agreeing with me. You're like, no, it's a horrible thing. It's horrible. Don't drink that much orange juice. No. You agree with me. It's not a big deal. Well, it turns out that you're not supposed to You're not. Hey, let me see actually how much orange juice was in that container. I'll be right back. Tropicana blend. It was Tropicana. I'm sure they're gonna love this advertisement. It was 48 fluid ounces. So what's a gallon? I don't know. But the entire thing, if I drank all of it, which I did, it's only 600 calories. So I was like, dude, that's like, I could drink this instead of eating a meal. This is delicious because I get it with pulp. Right? I don't do that no pulp nonsense. Give me that pulp. 48 fluid ounces, however much that is, in a gallon. It looks like it was 1.4 liters. So, I drink it. And I probably not over the course of 5 hours. It's probably over the course of maybe 2 or 3. But the point is that I drank it, and I'm feeling fine. Totally fine, right? But then I started getting a little gassy. I was like, oh, why am I gassy? And I don't know if I'm coming down with something. I haven't been feeling. My stomach's been kind of upset over the last day. Yes, Jason. Because not only did you drink 1.5 liters of orange juice, there's pulp in it. I go, oh, I'm pretty gassy. I wonder if it could be because I drank a giant amount of orange juice in a short amount of time. Did you know that you're not supposed to drink a lot of orange juice? So you're like, yes, Jason, we also learned that gasoline is flammable. No, and it's weird. I don't believe this. I don't believe this at all. And I've continued to drink orange juice, not so rapidly. But apparently, orange juice is not good for you. It's only good for you in small amounts. I found this website because I was like, why am I so gassy? Found this website and it said, you're not supposed to drink a lot of orange juice. And they were explaining why. And I think that this is all made up. I don't think that this guy knew what he was talking about. First off, he said it's super acidic. So it'll upset your stomach. And I was like, okay, he might have got that part right. Because of the way my stomach feels. But then he's going on about there's so much vitamin C in it. You're not supposed to have that much vitamin C. You shouldn't be. It wasn't a website. It was an email from my doctor. Stop drinking orange juice so quickly, Jason. They're saying that it has so much vitamin C in it, it can actually cause like an imbalance. But I think that was mostly for pregnant women. And then it kept going on and on about the acid. It's talking about you're not supposed to. I didn't know this. I know if you brush your teeth and then drink orange juice, it's a disgusting taste, but did you know that if you drink orange juice and then brush your teeth, it can ruin the enamel on your teeth? I go, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, maybe if you like were gargling it. But anyways, there were more warnings on this website about orange juice consumption than I imagine there is with any other beverage outside of alcohol. It went on, and it was saying all this health risks and tooth risks and stuff like that, baby risks. Don't drink 1.5 liters of orange juice if you're pregnant. And then at the ending it says, so when can you drink orange juice? And this website recommended there's only 2 times during the day a human should drink orange juice. It's either 2 hours after breakfast or 2 hours after lunch. So that's the only time that anyone should drink any amount of orange juice, and you should never drink Jason amounts of orange juice. Now, see, for me, this replaced my lunch. I said, well, instead of going out to get lunch, I'm just going to drink a bunch of orange juice over the course of 2 to 3 hours. I'll feel like I'm at a buffet. Oh, this is the longest meal ever. But they say you're not supposed to drink it on an empty stomach because it's full of acid and it messes up your guts and stuff like that. But I don't know if any of that's true. What's interesting, the reason why I brought that up, because I personally, I wouldn't say it's a phobia. It's not a fear either, but it's a worry of mine, and this pops up from time to time, where I understand the limits of my own knowledge. I know that I really don't know a lot about things just in general. I understand that. And I remember the story about this guy who, I'll put this story in the show notes, put this up, the article in the show notes. There was a guy who, it was a famous story. It happened a couple of years ago, but it kind of came to its conclusion. A group of college buddies were sitting around having a party outside, and there was a slug moving across the patio, and some dude goes, hey, Gary, I don't remember the guy's name, but hey, Gary, I dare you to eat that slug. And Gary's like, hell yeah, I'll totally eat that slug. And he ate the slug. And then 2 weeks later, his brain stopped working. His, limbs froze and stuff like that. He's like, help me, Mom, I'm sick, what's going on? And the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. And then by the time they did, it was too late. And he suffered severe brain damage, and he was basically a quadriplegic with brain damage for the next 20 years, and he passed away a couple years ago. And I thought, listen, I'm not in the slug-eating business. I'm an OJ man myself, but the point of that story, I'm reading this story, and I thought, who would have thought that you could ruin your life by eating a slug? Because you think, well, people eat escargot, and I read a really good article on this whole thing a couple years ago, and it just explained, this doesn't happen with all slugs, but there are some slugs that have this parasite that will destroy a human brain, or really any animal's brain. It's like almost a self-defense mechanism. But how many dumb dares have we done in our life? You don't even think that could be a consequence. I understand if I'm speeding down the road 110 miles an hour, there's a consequence. I'm going to kill myself or someone else or get injured. Yet I would still do it back when I was younger, just racing around town. But I never would have thought, the race is over, we all pull into the local Denny's, give each other high fives, and then there's a slug walking by, and I go, hey man, if you thought that was radical, watch this, and eat the slug, and then my brain stops working. I know that I have a limit to my knowledge. I know there's a lot of stuff I don't know, and no one at that backyard party knew that eating a slug could melt your brain. So that thing does always sit in my mind. I always think, what if there's serious health problems that can arise if you drink too much orange juice in a short period of time? And, when I started getting gassy, I go, well, maybe I'm gassy because I think I'm feeling better today, but past couple days I've had a stomach ache. And I go, I wonder if the orange juice could be causing that. And it possibly was a contributing factor, yes. But what if I had looked it up and they said, oh no, if you drink more than 1.5 liters of orange juice in a day, your brain stops working and you're paralyzed. Then at that point, it's too late. I'm already on my eighth cup of orange juice as I'm reading the website. I'm on no! You know what I mean? We don't know what is out there. Same thing with water intoxication. You can die from drinking too much water. I had a buddy of mine who was directly involved in this. Back in the early 2000s, a radio show on a very popular radio network in Sacramento. This was nationwide news, so I'll keep the story brief. We'll get on with this. But they had a contest called Hold Your Wii for a Wii. And this was when the Nintendo Wii first came out, and these DJs came up with this contest. People from the neighborhood, I think they had 3 contestants, come out to the radio station. They drank a bunch of water, and who could ever hold their urine in the longest won a free Nintendo Wii. A good buddy of mine, I'm not going to say his name, but a good buddy of mine was working at the radio station during that contest. He'd been working at the radio station for a while, but he was there that day. And you had the 3 contestants, they drank a bunch of water, they held in their pee. And the woman who won, she was a wife and mother, she won the Wii. On the way home, she began to develop a horrible headache. She went home, laid down, and died. And it's called water intoxication. You can actually drink so much water, and if you don't relieve yourself, you'll die. And the radio DJs didn't know that. My buddy didn't know that. Nobody ever thought in that studio, because they never would have done that. These people, they were good people. They weren't trying to murder a woman. You go, well, everyone knows about that. Yeah, a lot of it because of that news story. There was a trial. I don't think it was a criminal trial. I think it might have been a civil trial. Because a mother died over this for a Nintendo Wii. But that nobody knew that you could actually die from drinking too much water and not urinating. So that type of stuff always, I won't say it fascinates me. I won't say that it scares me, but there's something about it that every so often, like if I'm washing my hands with soap and then I reach and grab a ham sandwich and start eating it, I think, well, what if this is a bad combination? There's a lot of people that don't know that bleach and ammonia creates mustard gas. What if hand soap and ham sandwiches, because they sound so closely alike, what if I get horribly ill because I did these 2 things back to back. It's weird because it doesn't stop me from doing things, but it does feel like it borders on OCD sometimes. I just think about it. I'll still continue to do the action. But yeah, I think, and you know, there are a ton of things out there that if I did that, I washed my hands with Dial soap and then made a ham sandwich, there could be a bunch of doctors out there be like, oh no, of course, that's like a totally real known disease that if you touch ham shortly after washing your hands, it can create some sort of mutant level of botulism. We don't know. I don't know. You don't know. Maybe somebody does. I don't think that actually happens, but you know what I mean? We don't know what we don't know. And it does make me wonder about the slug man. I don't think he wants to be referred to as that. I'm sure he wants a different legacy, but I'll never eat a slug because of that. I never would have either. But, and if I ever see someone about to eat a slug, I go, yo, wait, homie, stop. Don't eat that slug. They're like, oh, that was a compelling argument. No, if they're like, no, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat the slug, I'll be like, hey, man, let me tell you a story about a man who ate a slug. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started with the episode. I actually think those stories, unlike yesterday, where I was talking about some AIDS documentary I watched for 20 minutes. It was called The Gift. I actually found that documentary. Super controversial documentary, by the way. I'll put it in the show notes again if you want to watch it. I think it's on streaming. It's really good. It was heartbreaking, though. It's about bug chasing. I'll put that episode in the show notes as well. But anyways, yesterday I went off for 20 minutes. I think I edited it down to 5, but about about a documentary about AIDS and fetish clubs and bug chasing and all that stuff. Had nothing to do with the story. I think these ones actually do they don't have anything to do with the story, but I think they're just kind of weird. That's almost paranormal, right? You don't know what you don't know. All the mysteries of the world. And you don't know which ones might be dangerous to you. I think that makes sense. I think that's a good start. Okay, Nick and Helena, let's go ahead and... Oh, we're already taking the train. Did I do the train sound effect yet? Chugga, 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 choo, choo. We stop and we get some orange juice. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you guys, okay? That originally was not the first story I was going to tell on this episode. Originally, it was this crazy story that took place in a sleepy suburban neighborhood. That I'll save for next week. I kind of like that segment, right? I think it's almost like a mental illness of mine. And it's not necessarily paranormal, it's just a weird story. And I'm sure there are a lot of people like that. It does border on OCD. But originally I was going to tell a different story that was really creepy. And then I went on so long talking about that, I go, I'm just going to do that for my first story. I think it's interesting. I wonder if you guys out there feel the same way. Not that it was interesting, but having fears of things you don't know. See, I'm an information junkie, so it actually plays into that. I feel like I need to know what's going on. Not gossip, not stuff like that, but I just kind of... And I think that's part of it, right? I'm an information junkie, so sometimes my neuroses also have information related to them as well. Not knowing, is this dangerous? I know cliff diving's dangerous. Is drinking orange juice less than 2 hours after eating lunch, is that quote-unquote dangerous? Yeah, originally I was going to tell a different story, and then I did some masterful editing there. You didn't even notice. That was a story. And Helena, they're like, what? Seriously, bro? We've been Patreon supporters since pretty much the Patreon started. We give the orange juice? It's not even haunted. There's no true crime. Where's the conspiracy? Well, you want a conspiracy, see? That's a conspiracy. Big OJ lets you think that orange juice is healthy and you can drink it all the time. But maybe that's not true. And then you wonder what other juices you're supposed to consume and how much. Can you drink 2 gallons of apple juice in one sitting or not? Apple juice isn't a healthy juice. Orange juice is a healthy juice, I think, because of the pulp. The pulp has like fiber in it and probably some extra vitamins and stuff like that. Apple juice is just juice. And I do enjoy a nice glass of apple juice, don't get me wrong. But I could never drink 1.5 liters of apple juice in I won't say one sitting, because I did get up to keep refilling my glass, but it was all within a very short period of time. Apple juice is good, but it's not as healthy as orange juice. But who knows, maybe you're only supposed to drink apple juice once every full moon. after a gordita or something like that. It has very strict requirements as well. A conspiracy, some might say. But yes, Nick and Helena, you did get the orange juice. They were sitting down to enjoy a delicious slug together, so I did save their lives, but you did end up getting the orange juice episode. Now we're going to pivot. Nick and Helena bustin'. I'm going to go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. Everyone it's all super disappointed. They're all, what? I like that segment. I think that's super interesting, and it reveals something about me. And maybe you. I would be very curious to hear if you guys also have a strange fear of what you don't know. I think a lot of people probably do, but Nick and Helena bustin', we're tossing you guys the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. Everyone climb on board. We're leaving behind this sleepy suburban neighborhood, which we will revisit next week for another story. But for now, why don't you fly us all the way out to Texas? We're going out to Texas. This is a really interesting story or set of stories. And that's another reason why the first segment, I should just stop making apologies for it, but was so short was because this one I know is going to take a little bit of time. And first off, we need to give a big tip of the hat to Why American Lad. Is that how you pronounce it? Why American Lad. Thanks a lot for all of the research you did on this. We're standing in Texas, not just any old place in Texas. We're actually at the Brazos River. The year is 1951. And we're sitting there and we're watching all of these people play. There's some guys on inner tubes while some cuties check those guys out. Woohoo! And then there's probably like a dad and his kids, and they're like tipping over his canoe. He's like, just family fun, right? As we see him slowly surface face down. Well, actually, that's a great segue, because as we're sitting there, don't pay attention to the man currently drowning. I want you to look at that boy. And not just any boy, you're kind of looking around at all the boys. No, that boy. And I point, and then that's when you see a young kid struggling to reach the surface. And you go, oh my God, dude, is that guy drowning? Is that kid drowning? I go, yeah, he is, but we cannot interfere with this. We simply have to watch this boy as he struggles to gasp for air. We're not saving this kid, because if we interfere, then he won't learn an amazing life lesson, because what this kid is about, he's not going to die, don't worry about it. But he is about to have a near-death experience. And not just any near-death experience. This dude, since he was a baby, has been deaf. And so I kind of just sit back in my recliner. I'm drinking a classic Coca-Cola from 1951. You don't have to look so relaxed. You don't have to look like you're kind of enjoying what's going on. You can at least pretend to care that this kid is drowning. Well, see, we know that this guy's not going to drown, but he's about to have this near-death experience. And this kid hasn't been able to hear anything since he was a baby. Now, this is really interesting, and this is totally dope that Why American Lad did this. We recently did that episode about if a deaf person dies, would their ghost be deaf? And we really kind of delved into it. It's not as simple as it would seem, because the deaf community, a lot of them see deaf as simply part of their culture. They don't want to hear. They are proudly deaf. I'll put that episode in the show notes. We really went over all that. So to say that a deaf man would leave a ghost that could hear would be insulting. It'd be the same thing as telling a black man, oh, when you die, don't worry, you'll be white. Not ghost white, not like ghosts like white sheep. No, you'll actually become a Caucasian after you die, so don't worry, buddy. They'd be like, what are you talking about? So Why American Lad heard that episode, and he goes, this is super fascinating, and I didn't think about this, so hats off to you, buddy. He goes, I wonder if there is a difference between people who are deaf or hearing impaired and what their near-death experience would be like. I know, right? I didn't even think about that. So he went, there's a database of near-death experiences, and he used the search tool and he looked up people who were deaf or hearing impaired or had lost their hearing at some point in their life. He started digging through all of these stories. And he sent me over a bunch. I'm going to share one with you today, and then we're going to do an overview, because a lot of them also just have these kind of odd details about them. But we're at the Brazos River because we were meeting this kid. Let's go ahead and call him Bobby. He's 11 years old. We're watching him drown, but before this moment, he was a member of a local church, a Protestant church. But he goes, I really didn't care much. I didn't really think much about it. And I definitely wasn't saved, he says, which is where you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. Some Protestant religions require you to be baptized. Some just have you make that acknowledgement. But he goes, either way, I wasn't baptized. I wasn't saved. I didn't accept Jesus into my heart. I was just an 11-year-old kid living his life. And now he's losing his life as he's at the Brazos River. Also, since he was a baby, he was severely hearing impaired. So he never got to enjoy well, that's a word, right? The deaf community would be like, what is there to enjoy about it? It's a word that I would use because I can hear, but he doesn't get to enjoy music. He doesn't get to enjoy birds singing or wahoo! Little Mario making his noise or a podcast. Now, it's funny because he could feel the vibrations of a music. He could read the transcripts of a podcast. And he could just not ever play Super Mario World. But my point is that we do go, wow, I couldn't imagine losing my hearing. But people who are proudly deaf, it doesn't matter to them because they hear, quote unquote, hear in certain ways, different ways. But back to this drowning 11-year-old boy, Bobby is flailing, trying to get a breath of water, and he can't. So he dies. And he goes through this whole experience. Luckily, he came back to tell us all about it. But he said, I died, and what happened was, I find myself floating out of my body. Like, I can look down and see the drowning, flailing, physical form of me as my soul is lifting up out of my body, out of the river, out into the blue sky. He then found himself draped in clothing which he compared to the clothes that Roman people wore back during the Roman Empire. Togas, gowns, whatever word you want to use for that. He goes, it was pure white. And I'm standing there in this toga. It was odd because you couldn't see your feet. You look down and it's kind of like a long dress, but you could walk totally fine. Even though in the real world, you might trip and fall if your clothing was all the way to the ground. In heaven, or the border of heaven, as we may learn soon, you totally won't fall. Did you know that? Did you know that in the afterlife in paradise, you won't constantly trip and fall on your own clothing? Look, Mom, I don't even need my pants hemmed anymore. I have short legs, so I always need my pants hemmed. Sometimes my mom doesn't, but usually I just roll up the cuffs for my short legs. But think about it. I don't have to worry about that in the afterlife. Just walk around. And maybe my legs will be longer. I don't know. Who knows? But anyways, Bobby's there in the afterlife. He's wearing this robe. And then who does he see? Who's the first person that this guy meets? Jesus. Which is really interesting because we cover a lot of near-death experiences on this show. We also cover negative near-death experiences, which I love hearing those stories. A lot of times they're meeting relatives or meeting an unnamed guardian spirit, someone that they feel has been with them their entire life. They don't recognize them, but they go, this person must be my guardian angel. Bobby goes straight to Jesus. And Jesus is also wearing one of these white robes. They're both dressed like they're Roman citizens, which is super interesting. It's fascinating why that time period. I mean, I get it. That's when Jesus was born and died. But why Roman togas? Why Roman clothes? If a person who died in 1300 BC, some Babylonian warrior, took an arrow through the neck on a battlefield, would he have seen? I know Jesus wasn't born yet, but that's the crazy thing about the future and religion and the life after death, that it doesn't really matter when you die, or does it? When you die, would you meet Jesus? And you'd be like, who are you? And he's like, oh, listen, it's a long story, but for right now, hi. Would they also be wearing togas and stuff? If a caveman died, if he got his brains bashed in by a rival tribe, would he have been wearing robes? 5,000 years from now, if a Martian citizen dies, will he be wearing robes? Because robes do pop up in a lot of these stories. And this is, some people go, I don't mean to keep going on tangents on this story. I kind of want to tell the narrative. But this totally just, it's so fascinating. why the people go, this is why they think near-death experiences are fake. It's all imagining. You would imagine that's how Jesus would dress and you would dress in heaven because that's what we see in television shows. But if this is a real phenomenon, would a Martian citizen 3,000 years from now, when he dies, gets blasted in the brain by some laser pistol, will he be wearing robes? I'll try to stay on the narrative. I just find this stuff so fascinating. And you're going to be like, okay, I'm not going to be able to finish this sentence without dissecting it either. When Bobby meets Jesus, they're both wearing these robes, but that's not all. He said Jesus was a giant, which has its own set of whys attached to it. And a long time ago, when I was a kid, I believe that I saw a giant Jesus appear. Now, I forget who this was. I'll include this. I'll look this up. But I forget who this was. Someone who listens to the show, and I'll bring this back up. I'll give you credit. I just can't do it right now. I'll put it in the next episode because I don't remember who sent this to me. Someone who listens to the show, because I talked about where I saw a giant Jesus. They visited that place on Google Earth. And they said, hey, did you know there is a giant painting of Jesus at this funeral home? It's like 20 feet tall. And I honestly don't know if I knew that or remembered that. I was recently down in Sacramento. When we drove by, I kind of looked and I go, okay, that's what he was talking about. There is a giant painting of Jesus at this funeral home. It's about 20 feet tall. And again, buddy, I'll give you credit on the next episode. We'll give you a special shout out because I really apologize. I don't remember who told me that. Yeah, he's right. And he goes, is it because I was a kid when I saw a giant Jesus. I was at a funeral ceremony, but it was like more of like a memorial for fallen soldiers or something like that. It wasn't someone being buried. And I saw like a 20-foot tall Jesus. He goes, could it have been that you'd seen that painting? Now, what's interesting is I look at the painting, I go, well, that's not what Jesus looked like. He looked less like the traditional Jesus and more like the Jesus who we think he would be. Darker skinned, darker hair type of thing. He didn't, the one in the poster, the painting, I think he's with some animals or something like that. I could be wrong, but the Jesus I saw was like posing, kind of. Not in a painting sort of way. He was standing there. And then I thought, put on our conspiracy caps for a second, what if they had so many sightings of a giant Jesus at that funeral home that the funeral operator, the graveyard guy, said, hey, we need to get some mural money together. You gotta squash these giant Jesus stories. People might think that our funeral home is actually blessed, and millions of people may rush here, pay any amount of money to have their bodies buried. Let's paint a big old Jesus, so then it'll confuse kids. Now, that's a total, obviously, I have no proof to back that up. None. That painting's probably been there since the 70s or the 60s. I just don't remember it. But that is more likely than my story that people were citing giant Jesus and now people go, oh, it must have been what I saw. But anyway, so yeah, giant Jesus. And now I'm going to stay on track with this story. Bobby meets Jesus, not regular sized Jesus, but giant Jesus, 20 feet tall. Now here's the moment of truth. Would a deaf person be deaf in the afterlife? And he wasn't born deaf. He's had hearing problems, severe hearing problems since infancy. How's Jesus going to talk to this dude? And what Bobby says is what we see in a lot of these reports that American lad sent over. If someone is deaf and they die and have a near-death experience, all communication is done through telepathy. You're not even really hearing the words syllable for syllable. You're getting the meaning beamed right into your head. So even if you didn't know how to pronounce the word telepathy, the word telepathy and the idea of what telepathy is, based on also your knowledge from reading X-Men comic books, would allow you to understand what he said when he telepathically told you we're speaking through telepathy. All of this stuff, right? It's not really like you're hearing the voices in your head, you're getting the message in your head. And Jesus starts talking to Bobby via telepathy, and that's when Jesus brings out a giant screen the size of a drive-in movie theater screen, which in 1951 to an 11-year-old boy would be the height of visual technology. Or you wonder nowadays if it's a touchpad screen. Jesus comes out with like a stylus. I'm not making a joke, but he comes out with a stylus and a iPad and he's like circling things you did. And then it's appearing on an overhead projector. You're like, great, I can see all of my faults in high definition in 1080. Thank you, Jesus. And that's kind of what's happening with Bobby. He has this giant movie screen, and he goes, how it was set up was there were video moments of all different parts of my life. And they were like a mosaic on this screen. All these different images are playing at the same time of different things he did. Now remember, he's only 11, but he goes, listen, I did bad stuff. I did stuff I shouldn't have done. Maybe it was just, stealing a pencil from the teacher. Maybe it was something morally wrong. But I'm definitely not free of sin. I've done things, and some of it was minor. It could just be a criminal matter. Other things were actually moral failings of mine. And he's looking up at this movie screen. He's seeing all these different scenes of his life play out. He's like, oh, please, oh, I hope he doesn't highlight that one. I hope he doesn't highlight that one. Maybe Jesus will get distracted by all the moving images. He says there are all these moving images, and then when one was selected, it enlarged itself to around 80%, 90% of the screen, while along the border of the screen were smaller images still playing out, almost like picture-in-picture. So you'd have one memory zoomed in, and that would take up most of it, and then along the borders, you would still see all these moving memories playing. Very modern-day picture-in-picture, Star Trek type visual. Everything's going at once, but now, hey, we're going to pay attention to this one. Oh, another good analogy would be a bank of security cameras. But you're just looking at one, yet you can see the action taking place on all the other security camera monitors as well. And he goes, what Jesus would do? He's a little disappointed. He's like, oh, you're right. I got to talk about this part. He tries leaving it out as a near-death experience. He goes, Jesus would go, hey, dude, what were you thinking when you did this? Like, you knew this was wrong. What were you thinking? Really interesting, right? It's a moment of self-judgment. You're definitely being judged by someone else. But it's not, you did a bad thing. I mean, he does get to that point, but the first question is, why did you do that? Obviously, Jesus knows why Bobby did this, but he wants Bobby to say why he did it. But all of these elements, all of the stuff that he had done wrong over the course of 11 years, Jesus would point them out and ask the same question, why did you do that? What were you thinking about? Why did you come to that conclusion that was okay? But what was interesting was Bobby goes, he didn't just focus on the bad parts either. He didn't just focus on the bad parts. Jesus would say, hey, look at this, dude. Look at this. No one was around. No one was around at all. And you helped that guy. That guy, he needed some help. That fellow classmate, he was feeling down. And you didn't do it to impress a girl. You didn't do it so the teacher would take a liking to you. You got no benefit from it, not even from the kid you were trying to counsel. You sat down, you saw a guy was having a bad day, you talked to him for a little bit and tried to brighten it, and he just really wasn't having any of it, but you said, okay, buddy, well, hey, if you ever need anything, just let me know. And then you walked back out onto the playground. You did that with no reward in mind, and he didn't get one. He didn't say thank you or anything like that, but you did it anyways, because you have a big heart, Bobby. He says he pointed out good things that I had done too, and we talked about those. And oddly enough, Bobby said, I thought this was kind of an interesting element. I mean, it's all super interesting to me. But Bobby goes, you know what's funny, and I never would have thought this. Bobby said, I never would have thought this, but we would be watching parts of my life, and every so often I would say something funny, like in this memory, I would say something funny, or I'd have a funny reaction to something, and Jesus started laughing. Wait, what? He's like, I know, it's weird, because you don't picture Jesus, generally in the art, he was a man, right? So he had a full range of human emotions, but in the scriptures and in the retellings and all this stuff like that, he seems like a kind of a dour, serious dude. Bobby's like, no, we'd be watching a memory and something funny would happen, and not even in the main narrative. Like you see in the background of the memory, some guy trip and fall and get milk all over his clothes or whatever. Jesus is like, that isn't funny. That's funny to you, Jason. But, they'd be watching these memories and something funny would happen, and he goes, Jesus would start laughing. And not only would he start laughing, he laughed with much gusto. That's how he described it. Did you see that, kid? He almost broke his arm. That milk is so slippery. You're like, Jesus, what? He laughed at some of these memories. Sometimes if Bobby said something funny or whatever, he'd laugh. Now, what's interesting, too, again, because we're talking about death. We're talking about the afterlife, so not everything lines up perfectly. They're speaking via telepathy, but Bobby describes it as like it's these messages are being beamed into his head. He's hearing all of this talking, but he also says that when he is talking and when Jesus is talking to him telepathically, at the same time, he feels like his ears are being filled with the most joyous, vibrating music ever. He said that, imagine not hearing or hearing really, really poorly for 11 years, and now you have the senses of an eternal soul. It's also interesting, too, because what did he say? He said, the exact quote was, in fact, speech was almost like joyous, reverberating music, unquote. And people who are deaf or hearing impaired, they do focus more on the music as a series of vibrations. They can put their hands on the speakers, or they can feel the rhythm through the floor as the sound waves are going through them and around them. So the fact that even now he's mentioning the feel of the music. I'll hear the music move through me at like an Ice Cube concert when I'm right next to the speaker. But generally, I don't when I listen to music. I listen to, gangster rap in my car, so the bass, my mirrors will shake and stuff like that. But most of the time, I don't describe music as vibrating through me or reverberating through me. But that's a adjective that Bobby uses because that's how he experienced music in his normal life. So they're speaking telepathy, but at the same time, there's this sense of joyous music related to speech. So you have two different things happening at once because your senses are just so refined when you're dead. You're not limited to the structure of the ear or the limitations of the ear if it's been damaged, so on and so forth. But what happens is he, kind of to cut to the chase, he comes back to life. And it's this setup where Jesus is kind of asking him all of this stuff about his life, but Jesus knows that Bobby's not going to die. In fact, this is a near-death experience. Bobby's going to go back down to earth, and maybe this will be a good reset for him. So Bobby is sent back to Earth. And what's funny is he's sent back into a drowning boy's body. He goes after Jesus was like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. It's not your time yet. You got to go back to Earth. Bobby is then flailing for breath underwater. He's put back in the body that is about to die, but he is able to make it to the surface. And at that point, he just begins vomiting water, and his friends who now have come to his aid, like, Bobby, are you okay? Blah! Blah! Throwing up water. So we have this issue of telepathy, and yet it's funny because he's hearing impaired, and we're going to get to someone who is truly deaf and proudly deaf. We're going to talk about that in just 1 second, but Bobby is hearing impaired, severely hearing impaired, and he goes, you can speak through telepathy, but you also hear the speech, and it's just overpowering. And on these near-death reports in this website, they have a narrative part of it, and then they ask a series of questions, and they'll just kind of do like a question and answer thing. What's interesting is for this one of the questions was the experience difficult to express in words, i.e. the near-death experience? And Bobby answered, yes. I'll read you this quote. He goes, quote, the English language is not capable of describing the beauty of colors I saw. How can you describe 1,000,000 beautiful colors when our language only knows 100 shades of 5 basic colors? How can you describe the sound of a melodious voice that has never been heard on Earth? unquote. And when you dig through these near-death experiences, that's a pretty common theme. That really is a pretty common theme. I can't even describe to you the beauty that I saw. And what's interesting is a lot of them say, because, they're answering this question, the interviewer's question, and they'll say, I'm sorry, but it's more beautiful than I can ever put into words. Like, they feel bad that they can't share that part of the experience. They can tell the narrative, but they understand the narrative's missing a lot of big parts to it, and that is the colors and the sounds and all of these things. You might be able to describe a meadow on Earth, but could you ever describe the peace of paradise? And a lot of them say, I'm sorry, but I can't find the words to describe it to you. They feel bad that they can't share that part of it. So Why American Lad grabbed a bunch of these stories. And some of them, I read them all. I wanted to focus on that one. And then we'll talk about just a few of these other ones in detail, in brief. And then I got one more for you that'll also be brief. But anyways, there was a woman who was deaf in one ear. But when she had her near-death experience, she could hear completely normal. Both ears. And again, it was a melodious sounds coming from everywhere. That tracks with what we think of when someone dies and they leave a ghost. The ghost is repaired. Most of the time. Headless Horseman, not so much. But if you step on a landmine, you get blown to bits, your ghost generally appears as someone who's not blown to bits. It's a normal guy walking down the street. One woman had hearing loss as she got older. She wasn't born with it. When she had her near-death experience, she spoke through telepathy. She wasn't able to hear directly. So it's odd because Bobby does say we speak through telepathy, but then he does also talk about hearing voice. But it's also telepathy. It's in his head. But it's also, he can hear it. These stories, the thing about the paranormal, you can't ever really put a lid on it. Two things can be true at once. He's hearing telepathy and the voice, but they're speaking only through telepathy. But he hears the voice. But the voice isn't where he's receiving the words. He's receiving the words. You know what I mean? Like, to us, we go, that's an oxymoron. It's either one or the other. But to him, both can be true at the same time, because we're talking about eternal life. One man, when he on Earth, he could see and hear perfectly well, but when he had his near-death experience, he was struck blind and deaf, which again would be pretty alarming. And he received all of this communication through telepathy, and he heard the act of contrition in his head. And he goes, I had never heard of the act of contrition before. I didn't know what it was, but I heard it. What's interesting about a thing like that is that you could feel like if, this is going to sound weird, but that might have had to happen for him to pay attention to what was going on. That makes sense. Instead of being overwhelmed by the sights and the sounds, he might just be the type of personality where they're like, listen, it's not your time. It's not your time. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's not your time. And someone is trying to communicate with him, and he's like, wow, look at this amazing place. And they're like, okay. And they strike him deaf and blind so he can really focus on the message. But let's take a look at a story. He totally had fine hearing and vision going into the near-death experience. He was struck deaf and blind during it. Let's take a look at one. Again, it's going to be kind of an overview. Oh, I did want to say, too, I might cover this at a later date. See, here's the thing. I didn't want to do two in-depth ones here because it would just take too much time. I'd really like each story to be able to kind of stand on its own. There is one that I'll probably cover in the future. It's also along this line. It was one of the ones of Why American Lad sent over, where the woman was told by the entities during her near-death experience, she was told what her future was going to be in pretty vivid detail. And it all came true. Not easily. Not easily. They told her things that she could do, and these things would happen if she did them. So she should do them. But it's really interesting. It's not like, here's the lotto numbers. They really listed out a whole chain of events that were going to happen in her life if she started X. if she did these things, this would happen. And then for these other things to happen, she has to do this to happen. Kind of odd. She might have been a very listless person. She might have not had a lot of guidance in her life. And she was just going to kind of float around from job to job, event to event, boyfriend to boyfriend. And no one ever put her on the quote-unquote straight and narrow. So this near-death experience did. I kind of want to spend a little time talking about that as its own. This last one that I just kind of wanted to go over briefly, it's pretty by the book, except for the fact that this man, who we will call Jerry is deaf, and he is proudly deaf. Profoundly deaf is another way he describes it. He dies. Oddly enough, also, or near-death experience, oddly enough, also in a Texas river when he's a young boy. Might be something in the water down there. This was in New Braunfels, Texas, along the Comal River. He was 10. And Jerry had ended up having an issue where he ends up going over a waterfall. Small waterfall, but a waterfall nonetheless, and he ends up not being able to surface. He wasn't a strong swimmer. And there he is underwater when he has this near-death experience. And in his experience, he reaches the border of heaven. And it is there where he sees, he goes, it was interesting. I knew these people were my ancestors. Some of them I knew or knew of. Grandparents and great-grandparents. But some of them I had no idea who they were. You know what, honestly, I'm looking over at this, and I think I want to do this as a separate segment as well. It is kind of by the book, but I keep getting compelled to stop and take my time with this one. It's really interesting. I had it set up to just basically say he was deaf, and then this is the experience he had via hearing, but I'll be honest with you, like, I don't want to rush through this one. I don't want to rush through this near-death experience either. Because it does feel by the book, but something about it is actually saying, no, take your time with it. So I'm going to follow my gut instinct on this one. I'm actually going to save that one. Maybe we'll do that next week, and then the one about the near-death future, we'll save for a couple weeks. I don't want to overload the show with these stories, but yeah, so it's weird. I'm just having a sense, a feeling, don't rush this one. Let's talk about Jerry another time. Because although it does seem by the book, it's because it's a 10-year-old boy, he has a unique take on some of the stuff, and I don't want to rush through it. So anyways, we'll save that for another time. But so basically, this was the episode without a beginning, because basically it was me talking about the orange juice conspiracy, and without an ending. But I will say this much of Jerry's story. He can't hear. When he dies and goes to this afterlife, he can't hear anything. He was deaf even in the near-death experience. He said his senses were magnified to no end. What he could see and what he could feel were had a far greater range than he'd ever experienced on Earth. But he was deaf. He was deaf in paradise, or on the border of paradise, just as deaf as he is on Earth. And that really is the important part, and we'll really go into detail with the story next week, but that's kind of what I was saying. Remember, he is proudly deaf. He goes, this is my culture, this is who I am, I don't want to hear. So his afterlife, he still doesn't hear. Everyone that he meets, they're speaking through telepathy, and he meets a whole host of people. He's speaking telepathically. And I find that super interesting. He views himself as a proudly deaf person. And in heaven, he was not quote-unquote fixed. Because there's nothing to fix about him. Fascinating, really. Fascinating. Because we do see that as a limitation on Earth. If that happened to you tomorrow, there'd be all sorts of insurance payouts. If someone caused it, you could sue them. And the whole point of the lawsuit is to make you whole. That's the term that's used in lawsuits, saying you used to be this, but now you're more limited because you lost your hearing. You're suing for the money to make it right. That part of you is gone. We would consider it a disability. We would consider it a loss. but not to Jerry, and not to hundreds of thousands of other deaf people out there. It's who they are. So this story does really kind of cement in what we said, because really with the last story, I just had the hypothesis, if a deaf person dies, would their ghost be deaf? And I said, it depends, but probably, on how they feel about being deaf. And now we have this story where a guy did die and go into paradise, and he's like, oh no, I was deaf there too. I could see things like I've never been able to see before. I could feel things in ways I can never feel them before, but I was deaf. Fascinating. So we had a theory, and now we have a story that backs up that theory. But again, I don't want to... It's so funny, because I don't often get this feeling. And as I was trying to get his segment started, I only wanted to talk about it for 5 minutes. I was going to do a real brief overview and talk about some of the answers he gave to the interviewer. And I was like, no, there's something about the story. I want to share it with you guys in full. So we'll do that next week. Also next week, we'll probably do it on the same episode. We'll do a creepy story that I was planning on telling you about today, but instead we talked about my own delusions. I don't know if delusions is the right word. Fear. I don't know if that's the right word. I just wonder what I don't know, and if what I don't know ends up killing me or hurting me a lot, or, turning me into a brain dead dude because I ate something. And when I do, everyone goes, well, how did he not know that? He was always reading the internet. How did he not know that you weren't supposed to combine lima beans? Actually, there is something about lima beans, right? If you boil them, you can make cyanide. Is that lima beans? It's some sort of bean, right? That you can make poison. If you boil them and you skim off the top, you can make some sort of arsenic. I think is what it is. It's arsenic. Bet you didn't know that. You're like, Jason, you don't even know that. You go, oh, it's some bean. Oh no, Dennison's chili. I can never eat you again. No, it is some bean that you can actually use, or is it ricin? It's, Jason, you barely know. You've named 3 poisonous substances and 2 different kinds of beans. There is a bean that you can use, you boil it, and you can either make ricin, arsenic, or cyanide. Most people probably don't know that. To be fair, I don't know it either, but I know it can't. But like, what if you didn't know that? And you're like, oh yes, Mom always used to make these beans, but she never let me drink the boiling water. She's always so mean, and she never let me drink the boiling water. You know what I'm going to do? Because it's my house and my beans. I'm going to skim some water off the top, and I'm drinking it. Glug, 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 glug. And then, you don't go to work the next day, and then that night, you don't go out to that party you're supposed to go to, and then the next day, you're not at work again, so they send someone to your house, and they find you with your hands clutched around your own throat, a look of fear and confusion in your dead face, all because you didn't know that some bean can kill you. Some bean can kill you if it's produced. I think it's lima beans, and maybe it's not even the water. Maybe it was just scraping off the top with a butter knife. I don't remember. But my point is that we don't know what might end up killing us. I might get squished by a steamroller. I might fall off an 80-story building. But what if it's one of those things that gets me that's super simple? What? He didn't know that if you mixed kitty litter and toilet water, that it would cause this chemical plume that just blew his brains out? He didn't know that? That's like a fear of mine. I'm going to die of a way that I should have known. Maybe if I had just read one more article. I'm being totally serious. I think this is why that segment's been sticking with me all day long. Because I do feel like this is like a serious neuroses. I've never admitted to this before. I wonder if I had just read one more article, if I just had watched one more news report or something, I would have gotten that piece of information that would have prevented my death. Like, the more that I think about it, that actually is probably like a phobia of mine. It's really weird. But anyways, that's all for today's episode. Somehow I got stuck back on the orange juice conversation. Oh, and I hope to see you guys at the movie night or the movie morning. It really is a blast, and I like hanging out with you guys. It's a lot of fun. DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at Facebook.com/DeadRabbitRadio. TikTok is @DeadRabbitRadio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. It's 8:30 p.m. I'm about to have a big glass of orange juice. Have a great weekend.